Nope, hadn't even heard of it, okay, which is not surprising. The first meeting was in January. They had the second meeting in July. There was supposed to be a third one in November. However, that got redone, and it's going to be a more centralized location. I think they're going to do it in Addison. Of course, I have my suspicions why they're not doing another one here, but we'll get to that shortly. Clear Plan 2030 is a development plan for a 10-county region, with Chambers County and Tallapoosa and Coosa County being the southernmost of that 10-county region. There are a lot of things that are suspicious about it, and reason being is, is everyone familiar with Agenda 21, the United Nations Agenda 21? Well, if you're not, I'm going to try to show you a little bit about what that is. I know a lot of people think it's some kind of conspiracy theory, and it sounds like it. Agenda 21, Area 51, and but it's all documented. I've got all the documents to prove it. I've done a lot of research on it, and had been approached by several people about Clear Plan 2030 being Agenda 21. Well, when you start looking at it, I believe that's exactly what it is. However, so just to go ahead and get started, I want to read a statement from something on the website, the Clear Plan 2030 website. It says, while many rural areas around the country have embraced sustainability as a way to preserve small town character, agricultural lands, and open space, communities in East Alabama have proven to be particularly skeptical of sustainable practices. Although communities have been informed concerning principles such as utilizing, and keep these terms in mind, compact and cluster development, mixing land use, incentivizing smart growth, providing transportation choices, and preserving open space, many see these practices as being detrimental to economic development. Many communities scoff at these methods, decrying them as impractical or inapplicable to small towns and rural areas. Like I said, now keep this in mind. Been informed concerning principles such as utilizing compact and cluster development and incentivizing smart growth. We need to know what those incentives are. But anyway, here's a part of the website. Everything looks like puppies and butterflies. It's all making everything better. The economy, the environment, more livable. And here's a flyer of one of the events. Well, it's actually the upcoming event in Addison, the one I was just talking about that hasn't happened yet. There was supposed to be one here in Chambers County. And this is a brochure, I'm sorry, from the website. And this brochure is up here. And I have tons of material up here for anybody that wants to come up here and take a look at it when this is over with. The back side of the brochure, this all sounds great. When I started doing my investigation of this, and you'll find out more about why I say this in a minute, but if there was one thing to make me say that this is in relation with Agenda 21, it's this little icon right here. When you click on that icon, it takes you to this, sustainablecommunities.org, which is supported by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Department of Transportation, and the Environmental Protection Agency. And on that website, there's a picture of Barack Obama there, and his quote saying, by working together, HUD, DOT, and EPA can make sure that when it comes to development, housing, transportation, energy efficiency, these things aren't mutually exclusive. They go hand in hand, and that means making sure that affordable housing exists in close proximity to jobs and transportation. That means encouraging shorter travel times and lower travel costs. It means safer, greener, more livable communities. Now, that sounds great too. Agenda 21 and sustainable development are terms used synonymously. They're both the same thing. And to give you an idea, we touched on Clear Plan 2030 a little bit. We'll get back into it some more in a minute, but I want you to know about Agenda 21. Betty Perry of Warren, Utah, in 2007, I believe it was. If you notice the mark on her nose, that is from where the handcuffs hit her when she was being arrested, because her lawn was dying. Julie Bass of Oak Park, Michigan, planted an herb garden in her front yard. Her front yard. And she even went to the mayor and the city council to make sure it was okay. And they told her sure it was fine. After she planted the herb garden, a code enforcer showed up and said, under these new regulations, you can't do that. She's now facing 93 days in jail for planting an herb garden in her front yard. Florida Forever. This is a wildlands project in Florida. 1,500 people are losing their homes in Dade County, Florida. We're going to find out in a second why all this is happening. And before I go any further, if you think there's not something like that in Alabama, which I don't even have time to get on tonight, Forever Wild in Alabama is the same program. The stuff you're going to learn here tonight is touching the tip of the iceberg. If you need to go do your own research, don't take my word for anything, but everything I show you tonight is fact-based and can be backed up with facts. Now, when you start studying this, will you find conspiracy theories? Of course you will. You got to learn to discern between the two. If you search deep enough, you'll find the conspiracy theory about the elite race of reptilian people. George Bush Jr. is one of them, and there'll be pictures of the skin peeled back, and you'll see the reptilian face up under his skin. Absolutely, there are conspiracy theories, but everything I show you is fact-based. In King County, Washington, private owners lose 65% of their land. Now, to understand this, we have to understand how important property rights are. They are unalienable. You cannot put a lien on them. Unalienable, however you want to call it. Property rights are extremely important in this country, and our founding fathers knew it so much that they put it in the Constitution. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Okay. If you don't understand this, you should take a course on the Constitution. You can do that online for free. You can take 2 or 3 of them and get 2 or 3 different teachers' opinions in a Constitution class. You won't get a certificate or anything, but you'll know and understand. But property rights are imperative for us having rights. Without property rights, we don't have freedom. This computer is mine. I can take it and smash it on the ground if I want to. I can put stickers all over it. No one else has any say-so what I do with this computer. It's my property. Now, if I give up 65% of it, well, it's not mine anymore. I don't have the right to put stickers on it. I don't have the right to destroy it. If someone else owns 65% of it, keep that in mind. Again, our founding fathers thought so much of it. George Washington said private property and freedom are inseparable. John Adams said property must be secure or liberty cannot exist. And also keep in mind, I don't mean to keep getting off the subject, but our founding fathers didn't just create a document called the Constitution because it was some crazy idea that they thought this would be something that would work real well. Our founding fathers were scholars of history. They understood the last several hundred years of history in England. They knew about the 1100 Charters, which was a list of grievances against King John. The Petition of Right, the Magna Carta, throughout the several hundred year period, the Grand Remonstrance, which was a list of grievances against King Charles in the 1600s. And just to let you know, and you can look this up if you want to, the Grand Remonstrance, King Charles was involved in sustainable development. He was taking private property away from landowners, all in the name of environmental protection. They beheaded him. Okay? And, but our founding fathers were scholars of history, and they were avid students of human nature, and they know that human nature never changes. That's the reason they wrote the Constitution the way they did. It is not an outdated document. It was a work of several hundred years of their study of history. Okay, back to Agenda 21, the birth of sustainable development. In 1982, this is how far back this goes, the United Nations asked Gro Brundtland to head up doing a report on how to save the planet from global warming and other environmental issues. She's a former Prime Minister of Norway. She was 3 times in a row. She's also the Vice President of the World Socialist Party. Now, we need to understand the players behind all this. The World Socialist Party of the United States is part of a globalist socialist movement that believes capitalism cannot meet the needs of the majority of the people in the world, however progressive it might become. To meet these needs, capitalism must be replaced by socialism. Now, why there's a socialist party in the United States, I have no idea, but there he is. And you can go to the homepage and see that there's her comment on that webpage. The other player, Maurice Strong. Anybody ever heard of him? He was involved in some real shady deals back in the day. He was Vice President of Dawn Petroleum in Canada by the time he was 25 years old. He also purchased 200,000 acres of land over the largest aquifer in the United States. Him and an Arabic arms dealer, I've forgotten the guy's name, but he was, anyway, he had shady dealings with shady people, not very environmental friendly. He bought that 200,000 acres of land, and him and this arms dealer said, well, we'll cut off the water supply to the farmers down south, and then we'll sell it to them. Of course, the Environment Agency guys come in and said, well, you can't do that. Okay, so this guy's violating all those principles. Plus, he is not somebody you would call a pillar of the community. Anyway, when he gets involved in this program, he said the mission is to provide leadership and encourage partnership in caring for the environment by inspiring, informing, and enabling nations and peoples to improve their quality of life without compromising that of future generations. Remember that comment. And that's on the United Nations Environmental Program homepage. Okay, this is the report. It came out in 1987, and it's right here. Our Common Future. This is a report that Gro Brundtland and Maurice Strong, Gro Brundtland had the majority to do with this, but he had his say-so in it also. And in Chapter 2 it says, development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now that's the definition of sustainable development. And it made its way into this book, and it was also referred to as the 87 Brundtland Report to the United Nations. It also says that poverty is a major cause and effect of global environmental problems. So now we're including poverty as also an environmental issue. So now it's just a couple of people at the UN creating this report. It's no big deal. But in 1992, Agenda 21, Sustainable Development, they had what they called an Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. And 18,000 people attended, including the President of the United States, George Bush Sr. And that's where this book came from. This is a 40-chapter book that codifies that report, Our Common Future. This is it right here. This is not a conspiracy theory, folks. This is real. This is all documented. Keep that in mind. So now we have an action plan. Maurice Strong, the organizer and chairman of Agenda 21, 1992, when he stepped out on stage, this was his opening comment. Current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class involving high meat intake, the use of fossil fuels, electrical appliances, home and workplace air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable. He also said, isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about? Now, first of all, when we get into saving the environment, now I'm not saying there's anything wrong with telling people when you change your motor oil, don't pour it in the ground so that it gets into the drinking water and things like that. But guys, and I'm not going to embarrass anybody, but those of you that are Christians, I'm a Christian. I believe in God. I believe Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. I'm telling you, there is no chance of us destroying this planet before God does. You need to understand that too. So then, after this, the Agenda 21 book, well, that 40 chapters isn't enough. So the Convention on Biological Diversity, they get together and they come out with this 1,100-page book. And this is the United Nations Global Biodiversity Assessment. This book describes what every nation on this planet has got to look like to implement Agenda 21. And it breaks down the 40 chapters of the Earth Summit and defines what every nation looks like. That's what I said. Okay. In this book, unsustainable human activities are skiing. You like building a pond in your front yard or backyard where you put the goldfish in and look at? That is an unsustainable human activity. Pastures where your horses can graze. Golf, all unsustainable. And according to this book, if it's unsustainable, it has to go. Roadways, concrete, pavement, it's all unsustainable. The family unit is an unsustainable human activity because of the growth population. The United Nations says this planet can only house 1 billion people. Well, we got 7 now. So, dams, unnatural rivers, the scales of justice in America are unsustainable. And the reason that book says it is because if when you was young and you carved in a tree, you and your sweetheart's name, well, in America, you can't prosecute somebody for that, for defacing that tree or whatever you want to call it. And you deer hunters out there, rabbit hunters or whatever, when you kill those animals, there is no legal recourse that can be taken for doing that. So the scales of justice in America are unsustainable. Private property is unsustainable. Consumerism. And it's all leading to this. And it's in this book right here. I think it's page 983. That map's not in here, but it tells you what percentage of what areas that created this map on page 983 in this book. Now, if you'll notice, all these red areas are core reserves and corridors, little to no human use. And this is what America's got to look like to implement Agenda 21, the United Nations Agenda 21. These yellow areas are buffer zones, highly regulated. Government officials, code enforcers such as that. You see all the red and yellow. Do you know where the human habitats are? You see the little black dots. There's a lot of them up through here. There's some here. That's where people live. And that's the only place people get to live, according to Agenda 21. But this can't happen in America, right? Well, in 1992, after that Earth Summit, George Bush signs the agreement in Rio to implement Agenda 21 is sustainable development in the United States. Now, has anybody heard George Bush talk about the New World Order? This was back in the early 90s. Some of you have. This is just a little short video.
Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order can emerge, a new era, freer from the threat of terror, stronger in the pursuit of justice, and more secure in the quest for peace. An era in which the nations of the world, east and west, north and south, can prosper and live in harmony. 100 generations have searched for this elusive path to peace, while 1,000 wars raged across the span of human endeavor. And today that new world is struggling to be born. A world quite different from the one we've known. A world where the rule of law supplants the rule of the jungle. A world in which nations recognize the shared responsibility for freedom and justice. A world where the strong respect the rights of the weak. We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order. A world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders. What is at stake is more than one small country.
That's enough of that.
Credible United Nations is like military intelligence and civilian work. Yeah, 30 years there.
I understand.
Been there.
Well, that is what George Bush Sr. was talking about, was that Earth Summit that he had just been to. Bill Clinton talked about it. Hillary Clinton talked about it. I don't recall George Bush Jr. talking about it, but I'm sure he did. And Barack Obama has talked about it. He's talking about it. But still, this was a soft treaty that George Bush Sr. signed, so we're okay, because it doesn't have teeth. But Mr. Clinton comes along, he messed that up. He signed Executive Order 12852, creating the President's Council of Sustainable Development to begin implementation in federal agencies. And that is where this book came in, Towards Sustainable America. This is the President's Council on Sustainable Development, advancing prosperity, opportunity, and a healthy environment for the 21st century. And Agenda 21, that's what it stands for. It is an agenda for the 21st century. Then, in 1997, the United States Conference of Mayors creates the Joint Center for Sustainable Communities. 2001, the National Governors Association endorses Smart Growth, advancing statewide sustainable development. And in 2011, Barack Obama signs Executive Order 13575, creating White House Rural Communities Act, enabling implementation of sustainable development in 16% of the United States. And can this really happen in America? This is the book I just showed you. Now, there's 7 volumes to this. I only have one of them. I didn't print out all the pages for this. But the President's Council on Sustainable Development is explicitly charged with recommending a national action plan on how to achieve sustainable development in the United States. The President's Council on Sustainable Development was conceived to formulate recommendations for the implementation of Agenda 21. So, guys, this is facts. This is not some scheme that the people that walk around with aluminum foil wrapped around their head so that people can't read their thoughts is talking about. The State Department submission to the 5th session of the Commission on Sustainable Development, April 1997. You can Google that and look that document up. It's right here. This President Council was created for nothing other than implementing Agenda 21 here in the United States. Agenda 21 principles are embedded in every federal agency: Department of Commerce, the Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Education, National Park Service. Is everything the National Park Service does bad? No. But these principles are embedded in these organizations. The Trust for Public Land, the Institute for Sustainable Communities, the Forest Service, Department of Agriculture, HUD, the American Planning Agency, I think that's what that's for, the APA, and tons of others, and non-governmental organizations. In the book, Agenda 21, the definition of sustainability again: development that meets the needs of a person without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is the 3 E's, is what they call them: social equity, economic prosperity, ecological integrity, equity, economy, and ecology. Social equity says that the individual gives up personal wants for needs of the community. The economic prosperity, free market replaced by public-private partnerships, international wealth transfer. Individual rights subordinated to environmental needs is on the ecological integrity side. We'll look at those one at a time. Laws coerce individuals give up personal wants for needs of the community. That's social equity. This is Harvey Rubin. He's a member of ICLEI. We're going to talk about ICLEI here in a minute. He's on the executive committee, the clerk of courts of Miami-Dade County, Florida. And this is another reason we talked earlier about Miami-Dade, Florida, all those people losing their property down there. Well, they're having a hard time with it because this guy is on the clerk of courts there. He's the chair of Climate Change Advisory Task Force, keynote speaker at ICLEI 2010. He said individual rights will have to take a back seat to the collective in the process of implementing sustainable development. Now, those people in Dade County, Florida, were told by the government that their homes were on wetlands, so they were going to have to move. So the government offered them about 30 cents on the dollar for their property. Well, they didn't like that, so they started fighting it. They called the Army Corps of Engineers to come in and do tests. The Army Corps of Engineers came in and said there is no evidence to support these wetlands. But and I'll tell you in a second why that didn't work. Economic prosperity, transfer of wealth. Agenda 21 preamble. The developmental and environmental objectives of Agenda 21 will require a substantial flow of new and additional financial resources to developing countries. Now, I'm sure everybody's heard Obama talk about spreading the wealth. And most everybody thinks that that means the guy that makes $300,000 a year needs to share some of what he makes with the guy that only makes $30,000 a year. Well, that was only a small part of it. Part of it is spreading the wealth of the United States to less fortunate countries. And a good example of that is, we can't drill for any oil here in the United States. Why? Or we're limited to it because of the environment. But we'll send money to Brazil to pay for them to drill for oil in the Gulf of Mexico, and then tell them that we want to be their biggest customer. Why is that? To transfer the wealth. That's what that's all about. The Rio Declaration on Environment and Development, Article 8, equity will be achieved through implementation of the international economic order and through transfers of resources to developing countries. The third part of the 3 E's, ecological integrity, individual rights subordinated to nature. This places nature over man. Human beings are at the center of concerns for sustainable development. They are entitled to a healthy and productive life in harmony with nature. Nobody has a right to tell me whether or not I have whether or not I'm entitled to a healthy and productive life. But it goes even further than that. The only time I have the right to be entitled to a healthy and productive life is if I'm in harmony with nature. To achieve sustainable development, states should reduce and eliminate unsustainable patterns of production and consumption. Now, these principles, we got them right here if anyone wants to look at them, but they are in the front of this book. J. Gary Lawrence, this is someone else you need to know about. He's the advisor to President Clinton's the Presidential Council on Sustainable Development I showed you a while ago. Urban Strategies Leader, ARUP Consulting, U.S. Smart Growth Leadership Council. He said, participating in a United Nations advocated planning process would very likely bring out many who would actively work to defeat any elected official undertaking Local Agenda 21. And he's absolutely right. So, we will call our process something else, such as comprehensive planning, growth management, or smart growth, livability. Tons of fuzzy and warm words that people like. Smart streets, visioning projects, consensus, greenways, high-density urban development units. You remember that we read at the very first of this presentation off of the website from Clear Plan 2030? Open spaces, that was in there. Walkable communities. Okay, implementing sustainable development. Growing smart. Smart growth manages people in urban development. And these wildlands projects manage the rural land. Forever Wild in Alabama. And like I said, I don't have time to go into that one, but that's another part of it. President's Council on Sustainable Development authorizes HUD to have created standardized legal legislative guide for all communities. And here's the legislative guide right here. The International Council for Local Environmental Initiative. This is ICLEI. Now, they push local communities to regulate the environment, guide visioning meetings with stakeholders, gain elected official buy-in via grants and intimidation, and minimize protest. Why do you have to minimize protest? Implement and enforce sustainable development. They're operating in over 600 communities now, and their goal is to be in over 1,000 by, I think it's 2015. I put it to 14, but that's irrelevant. They have on their website, they have a page that's dedicated to convincing you of all these conspiracy theorists that says they're part of the United Nations. And actually, they're not part of the United Nations. The United Nations commissioned them to implement Agenda 21, and they admit that. So in their trying to debunk the conspiracy theories, they actually tell them themselves and tell them what they are. Executive Order 13575, Establishment of the White House Rural Council, June 9th of 2011, President Obama signed it, grants the federal government authority over food, fiber, and energy of 16% of the United States. It provides 25 government agencies the power to leverage federal investments in rural areas to increase the impact of federal dollars and create the economic opportunities to improve the quality of life in rural America. Now, the first thing I want to point out is if you look at this, there's 24 agencies listed. The 25th one's blank. I mean, is that one they don't want us to know about, or is it left blank so that they can slip one in sometime whenever they want to? I don't know what that's about. To increase the impact of federal dollars. How do you increase the impact of federal dollars? You write laws, you write regulations. Federal regulatory agencies will increase the impact of federal dollars by doing so. acts through all government agencies to coordinate federal engagement with agricultural organizations, small businesses, educational institutions, healthcare providers, telecommunications services, research institutions, law enforcement, governments, healthcare providers. This book right here says to implement Agenda 21 on this planet, every person on the planet has to be covered by health care, health insurance. Now, whether that was part of President Obama's plan or not, I don't know. But it sure fits with what they're doing. 19 days after President Obama signed the executive order advancing sustainable development, White House senior officials met with ICLEI. And this is the process that ICLEI has its people go through. You have a planning group, ICLEI or other non-governmental organization, planning agencies and stuff like that. They select local committee persons. They send out these surveys. From them surveys, they filter them. They invite stakeholders that they filter too. They didn't filter them very well because one slipped through the cracks. They didn't like it. But the one here at Clear Plan 2030. And I'll tell you another thing that I learned while doing this research. I don't have the proof to show it, but these people are trained to handle someone that may speak up. They are trained to try to turn the crowd against you. They are trained to try to make you look ridiculous, like a conspiracy theorist or an angry woman. We got an angry woman back here, guys. But then the next meeting, I think it was your husband and Bubba. Who else was there?
My husband and Ron.
Ron was there.
Ron McClellan. They started asking the hard questions. Well, after that meeting, suddenly there's not going to be another one in Chambers County. It's going to be in Addison. I was really hoping they'd have one here in November because I'd really like to have gone. I was wanting to go to the second one, but that was during the time Nancy got sick. But anyway, they're not coming back to Chambers County. That doesn't mean they're not going to try to implement this in Chambers County because Chambers County is still part of that 10-county group. I think this should have come somewhere else. But the precautionary principle, those principles we were looking at a while ago, where threats of serious or irreversible harm to people or nature exist, anticipatory action will be taken to prevent damages to human and environmental health, even when full scientific certainty about cause and effect is not available, with the intent of safeguarding the quality of life for current and future generations. Even when full scientific certainty about cause and effect is not available. So they don't need scientific proof that those were wetlands. This is the principle they used on those people in Miami-Dade County, Florida. They just have a theory. They just have a theory about global warming. As a matter of fact, I think it's becoming more iffy as time goes by. And I remember when I was a kid, does everyone remember about the hole in the ozone? We were killing the planet because of the hole in the ozone because we were spraying underarm deodorant under our arms. Come to find out it's supposed to be there. It acts like a chimney for the earth. But because someone said it was happening, we're just supposed to buy it. There is absolutely no proof whatsoever about global warming. None. Zero. Amortization of non-conforming uses. Oh, this is interesting. Growing Smart Legislative Guidebook. This in this book right here. But for homeowners who live in a community that adopts the guidebook's vision, and when you adopt the guidebook vision, you accept grant money. When you accept that grant money, this is the NOFA from HUD. The Notice of Funding Availability. Now this describes what your community has to look like if you accept grant money from them, whether you like it or not. Now I'm not saying there's anything wrong with getting grant money and trying to get things done, but our elected officials really need to look at this and make sure there's no strings attached, because if there are, I don't know about the rest of the citizens, but I'd just as soon not have it I'm not willing to sell my grandchildren's liberty for some money. It's not worth it. King County, Washington, we talked about this a little while ago. These guys had a 65-10 or something like that rule put in there when they got their grant money. I was telling you about not owning 65% of my computer. Well, these guys found out they didn't own 65% of their land anymore. 17,000 people. You are not going to hear about these things in the mainstream media. If you don't own 65% of your property, you don't own it. And this is how they do it. Through trading and development rights, conservation easements. They come in here and they offer you this money to take this little right away from you. It sounds like a great deal. It sounds like puppies and butterflies. Next thing you know, you don't have your private property anymore. And it all started, follow the breadcrumbs. Our Common Future, the report that was written. Then the Earth Summit, the action plan. Growing Smart legislative book, I left one out, but towards sustainable communities. Now, from that came tons. When I first started researching this, I searched Clear Plan 2030. There's about 1 million hits. Some of it had something to do with Clear Plan 2030, some of it didn't. But thought I'd broaden it a little bit. I did a search on Plan 2030. I got almost 60 million hits. 2030 Regional Parks Policy Plan. Denton Plan 2030. Vision West 2030 West Valley City. Soaring into the Future Lancaster General Plan 2030. Shreveport Great Expectations. Vision 2030 towards the sustainable planning of Baltic Sea space. Kenner 2030. The Legacy 2030 update, the comprehensive plan for Winston-Salem, Forsyth County and its towns, City County Planning Board. Community Strategic Plan 2030 for that city or whatever. Comp Plan 2030. For those of you that think you're safe, if I know there's at least one here from Lee County. Lee County is not involved in Clear Plan 2030, but they have one called Comp Plan 2030. This is in every community in the United States, folks, and it's all the same thing. They can say they're not. Are they bad people? Not necessarily. Some of them may be liars. Some of them may just be up to their eyeballs in Agenda 21 and not even know it. I don't know. I haven't talked to any of them. Jamaica 2030. It's not just the United States. This is a worldwide thing. What you're seeing is the tip of the iceberg. I could sit here and pop these things up for the rest of the night. Clear Plan 2030. It's all the same thing. And it all leads to this. This is what we're going to leave for our children or our grandchildren. And I'm not going to call any names because I'm not going to try and embarrass somebody, but I was talking to a council person, and they're not here. I was telling them about this. Their response was, well, it ain't going to happen in my lifetime. Probably not. But how selfish is that? I will not look my granddaughter in the face in 20 or 30 years and tell her that I didn't care enough about her liberty to stand up and say something against this. They're influencing our children. This is a United Nations website. Education for Sustainable Development. Don't think it's not here, folks. Influencing our children. Permaculture as a tool for implementing the United Nations Decade of Education for Sustainable Development. The 40 chapters of Agenda 21 are the basis of the curriculum. They are taught consensus, not independent thinking. Facts are only man-made. About eliminating disagreement, we must rely on experts. Only okay to question certain ideas. Wealth is socially unjust. Man is destroying the environment. Man is causing global warming. Those are not open to question. And I've got all these books up here, as a matter of fact. Getting to know connected mathematics. Because the curriculum does not emphasize arithmetic, computation done by hand, Some connected mathematics students may not do as well on tests assessing communicational skills. We believe such a trade-off in favor of CMP is very much to the student's advantage in the world of work, page 84. Standard 3, they learn that mathematics is man-made. Mathematics is not a science discovered by man, it's man-made. It is arbitrary, and good solutions are arrived at by consensus among those who are experts. So 3 times 3, we don't know anymore. We're going to have to go to the experts. And there's a lady, I was thinking she was going to be here tonight. Her son, here in Chambers County, answered a question, 5 plus 5 equals 10. Explain why. He put because it's a fact. He got the answer wrong. And by the way, if you want to know how that's here in Chambers County, it's called Common Core. So they're implementing all this through planning and development, through a wildlands project, and through education. We spend more money on education in this country than any nation on the planet, but yet we keep falling further and further behind. And I'm telling you, if we don't do something, the day's coming when you guys homeschool your children, the government's coming for you. They're not going to let you do it. Even though the last 3, 4, or 4 years in a row, the winners of the National Spelling Bee were homeschooled. So the kids are getting a better education being homeschooled than they are in the public school system. But the government doesn't like that. The Education for Sustainable Development Toolkit, right here. Education is an essential tool for achieving sustainability. Generally, more highly educated people who have higher incomes consume more resources than poorly educated people who tend to have lower incomes. In this case, more education increases the threat to sustainability. You think this is an accident? No, it's not. Influencing our children, rescue mission, Planet Earth, it's right here. You can come up here and look at it. We'll show you some pages in here, and this is the tip of the iceberg, as I said. Who's the boss? Agenda 21 reflects global consensus at the highest level. Its successful implementation is first and foremost the responsibility of governments. Governments lead our countries. Governments are tops. No, folks, I'm sorry. In America, people are the tops. Government is the servant of the people. Agenda 21 says, get close communication between governments and non-governmental organizations. Cooperation between non-governmental organizations themselves should be increased. United Nations agencies should support non-governmental organizations. This ICLEI and all those other groups. Workers should take part in all decisions, cooperating with both employers and governments. Employees and governments. If I own a business and I want my employees involved in the decision making, that's my decision to make, not the government's and employees. And this one right here, help set up child care so more women can go to work. That's fine. If a woman wants to work, that's great. What happened to family? If a woman wants to stay home and raise her children. Oh, but Hillary Clinton said that it takes a village to raise a child. No, it takes a family to raise a child, a mother and a father. Our children do not belong to the community, folks. So how do you get people to change their dangerous habits? The answer is massive education scheme. Children can really help to educate their parents. They must tell them to use their cars less and compost and recycle more. Only in this way is Hertfordshire going to meet its local Agenda 21 targets. This book is full of this stuff. All of this political stuff. Why are we even concerned with showing that to kids? We can't teach them arithmetic. We got to tell them to depend on the experts to tell them what 3 times 3 is, but we're trying to teach them all this. Back to the Clear Plan 2030 website. a partnership between the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, the United States Department of Transportation, and the United States Environmental Protection Agency created the Regional Planning Grant Program in 2009. This program was instituted to support all that. This is the Clear Plan, this is a screenshot of the Clear Plan 2030 website. And this is the ICLEI website. Now the guy from Clear Plan 2030, Mr. Aycock, if I'm not mistaken, he said that Clear Plan 2030 was not involved with ICLEI. Well, he's either a liar or he doesn't know what he's talking about. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, Department of Transportation, Sustainable Communities Partnerships Grants Update. It's all right there. ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainable Ability, is the leading global network. Works to help local governments, You see how many times they mentioned to help local governments? ICLEI is a champion of local governments, working with elected officials. ICLEI's World Secretariat helps voice local government needs and priorities during international negotiations and agreements that will affect local governments, such as the United Nations, climate negotiations, and the upcoming Rio+20 summit. ICLEI is one of the many NGOs recognized by the United Nations to provide input into these processes. What this means is that ICLEI acts as a bridge between local governments and the United Nations processes. At the Earth Summit, national governments, including the United States under the Bush administration, negotiated and wrote Agenda 21. I hope you've seen enough, but ICLEI Sustainability Planning Toolkit, based on the model pioneered by the City of New York. And this is who they accredit. Credits and special thanks to the toolkit authors and contributors, and more information about ICLEI in City of New York's Mayor's Office. Now y'all remember, this is the guy that wants to tell you how much Coca-Cola you can have? That's not America, my friends. They're gaining ground in some areas, they're losing some in others. We can fight back. There are cities and communities all over the United States, it's just a small number of them, that are pushing back. And I'm not sure what the next step is. I personally think we need to drop out of that 10-county group and become just Chambers County, let them have their 9-county thing. Of course, someone needs to inform them. Of course, Danny Hubbard, the chairman for the Republican Party in Talladega County, has some great information. And I didn't have time to print out. I had a ton of stuff I would have printed out to hand out to everybody. But if you would like any of this information, Danny Hubbard's website speaks out against this, Common Core, the Wildlands Project, and there's a lot of great information in here showing you what I just showed you, basically, maybe even some more. The paper that you got when you came in, if you got it, there was an email sent to Bruce about Common Core. There is a meeting down in South Alabama Saturday. And I know you probably can't make it, but Scott Beeson, I've met him this last legislative session. I was up there working on that gun bill at the State House. And he's a great guy. He's a constitutionalist. He's down there trying to expose Common Core for what it is, and he is going to write legislation for this next legislative session that will rid the state of Alabama of Common Core and hopefully start teaching our children something. And I will be at the State House when that bill goes in to support him. And if nothing else, call him, email him, tell him you support him. Call your representatives, email them and tell them that you support what Scott Beeson is doing. Which is it going to be, guys? Now,
U.S. not to be.
that's what I'm hoping. But like I said, this is not some conspiracy theory. This is fact. This is all documented. It's all up here on this table. And I'm sure I had a ton of other stuff I wanted to tell you, but I sort of stuck with and I did do it in about an hour. That's pretty well. So there was a whole bunch of other stuff I wanted to tell you because, like I said, this is the tip of the iceberg. You need to do some research on your own. Don't take my word for it. Don't take Danny Hubbard's word for it or anyone else. But this is facts. And we've got to take a stand. And whether it just be calling our representatives and letting them know, call your local representatives and let them know that if they accept any grant money from this Clear Plan 2030 thing, you'd like to see the application and the contract before they do. And show it to, I wouldn't even show it just to one lawyer. I'd say let at least 3 or 4 or 5 lawyers look at it and make sure there are no strings attached to it, because if there is, let them keep their money. Second of all, I don't care a thing about living in a high-density, compact city. I like my country place with my acreage and open space, mine, not somebody else's. I guess at this point, I'll ask if there's any comments, because some of you guys that have been looking at this for a while have some comments to make that add to what I said, and if anyone has any questions, by all means, please ask, and if I don't know the answer, I will get an answer for you.
I'd just like to say that when we was at the meeting, that the way they took the survey for our area is they gave the elementary school children forms to take home for their parents to fill out. Am I right? That's how they got it into this area, is through the school.
Right.
And the only way we knew about it, I read it in the Valley Times News and went,
Right.
and wanted to see what it's about, more or less.
Did you go to the first one?
No, I did not.
This has been coming on for a long time because, I've been hearing about this for a couple of years, and I went to the meeting and actually confronted Mr. Aycock about how this related to Agenda 21, and just showed him Danny Hubbard's article is what I was doing when he told me I was a conspiracy theory, and I sat around all day thinking of these conspiracy theories, and I said, I'm a citizen of this county, that's why I'm here. I work, I don't have time to sit around all day and think of conspiracy theories. And he was arguing with me, and I was laughing, and I kept telling him, he said, I don't know this man, I don't know him. I said, I didn't say you did, and I turned around and walked off, and that's when he called me an angry woman, and then I asked him what his name was, and he told me his name was Adolf Hitler.
I believe it.
When I told my husband that, my husband got very upset.
You should have said
My
no.
husband let him have it at the next meeting.
Adolf Hitler would have looked at this plan and said, wow. And I tried to do this using guns and force.
Yeah,
This
he
would have
was
been a
very
much better
adamant
plan.
that it was not Clear Plan 21 was not part of Agenda 21, which I had read and knew it was, and that's why when I talked to you, I told you I knew it was part of. I've studied it enough to know that that's what they were trying to do, and it goes by so many different names.
Right,
Well,
sustainable development.
The sad thing about it was they went around the room and introduced you, wanted you to introduce yourself and tell you who you represented. And when it got to me, I didn't, I'm just me,
Right.
There was 3 people besides us that were just citizens.
Yeah.
Everybody else was county officials,
Yeah, county
school
official.
boards and stuff like that.
Right. And so that's another thing. I looked on the Clear Plan 2030 website, and there was less than 1% of the people in Chambers County who went to this meeting. But now on their brochures and their website, it's all about you. You asked for this. You've spoken, we're responding.
But when we confronted him, he said, hey, we've taken up enough this time, he had to move on because he couldn't answer
He
our
was
questions.
through.
Exactly, and they're not coming back to Chambers County now.
Yeah.
But that don't mean they're not gonna still try to implement this in Chambers County. We need to run them out of
They
town.
ran him out of Notasulga. I saw your list there.
Mhm.
Frank Dillman was part of that. They ran him out of.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Very good, very
Supposed
interesting.
to have been like a 3-day event.
Yeah.
They cut out.
Well, well, the reason you don't hear Agenda 21 here in Alabama in these plans, and the reason they're trying so hard to hide it, is because our governor last year signed a bill by Senator Dow, SB 477, that makes Agenda 21 illegal in the state of Alabama. Anything connected to Agenda 21, anything that looks like Agenda 21, here's the bill if you want to read it. It's illegal. I'd like to see some arrests made, just me personally. Here's an article about that. And guys,